Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time to grab your bags and hit the road as we follow the All Over the Map family as they wander the world over the next year in search of their forever home. With the two crazy parents that packed up their family, didn't just put them in the back of the station wagon. They put them on a boat and a truck and a trail around the world here. The two people crazy enough to do this. Let's bring in Michael and Caitlin Domner. Hey, guys.
Hey, Paul. Glad to be here.
You didn't just pack up the kids, as we said in the last couple of episodes, and go out to see Yellowstone. It started with that kind of vacation feeling. It's turned into a journey. This is your new life, at least for the next year here. How's it feeling so far?
It's feeling great. We've had our moments where we've been exhausted and kind of fall into bed at night, and we've had our moments where it's just one of the most incredible experiences that I've ever had. So I feel like we've run the gamut here, even in the first however long it's been. Yeah, the first month.
Caitlin, do you agree with that? Come on, tell us the truth now. Here, you're saying, what did I get into?
I have to when we do certain adventures and I pinch myself and I'm like, oh, this is our life. And it's amazing. And then last week I hit a wall and I was like, you know what, maybe we're not cut out for this. Maybe we should kind of pack up and head back to the States. And, it's finding the pace, finding the rhythm, realizing that this is just living. It's living in a different context. It's living in different locations. It's trying to run your business on somebody else's Wi-Fi. But it's just life. And yes, you get to see interesting things. Like I walked through the rain to the market last night to get a chicken from one place and bread from another place and vegetables from a third place, and walked home, and stuff that you would never do in the United States. But I'm realizing our kids are changing, and we probably are changing as well. We just are in the middle of it, the transition. So we can't always see what's happening, but our kids are getting used to riding in the backs of tuk-tuks and seeing families of 5 on the back of a moped, and none of them wearing helmets, and just the kind of things that would never, ever happen in the United States. And I think that's shaping all of us to have a deeper appreciation for what the good and the not so good of being in a suburban Americana lifestyle.
Well, that is a mouthful and well said. And there's a lot to unpack, not just today, but as this journey unfolds over the next year here for both of you. Or whenever you might decide 2 months in, ain't going to go any further. Or you might decide, hey, this is too much fun. We ain't going to stop. So, we don't really know which way this journey's going right now. We just know some points along the way that you've already plotted out here. Today, we're going to talk specifically about when you left the border. For most Americans, that's a big moment. Most of us spend most of our life, if not all of our life, within the confines of these 50 United States here. And it's a pretty big country. I remember the first time I drove across the country, and I drove for, 24 hours. And then I drove for another, I drove for like 12 hours, and I drove another 12 hours. I'm like 24 hours out from where I started. And I suddenly realized it's as far back as it is forward. I can't just turn around and go back home tonight here. It's going to take a couple days to get home. I might as well keep going. It'll take a couple more days to get across the country here. You get out into the middle of the country, into the wide open spaces there, and you realize how really big America is. Talk about
it is huge.
That's one of the reasons why we did our road trip across the U.S. Was to kind of give the kids just a piece of a view of the scope and the kind of the differences across the U.S. But there's definitely a threshold that we crossed. There's a moment we flew out of Miami and we flew down to Cancun, which is only, it was like a 2-hour flight. Like, it was very short, but I remember flying over. We'd taken off from Miami, kind of headed west across Florida, and I remember looking down and seeing Key West and seeing the Florida Keys down below us, and realizing I was sitting next to Jackson and said, "All right, we're leaving the country." And it was just this moment of just a big sense of we're on our journey now. We've stepped across the threshold. We're really doing it. After almost 2 years of planning it, it was definitely a big moment.
And suddenly you realize this isn't Kansas anymore here. This is truly a different world. I know the couple of times I've ventured not very far south into Mexico, and each time I come home and I say, wow, I have a tendency to think it's kind of a lark, and all of a sudden you realize you can't get gas everywhere. There are bandits on the road. There are cops that'll pull you over and demand a bribe, or crazy things happen. Or like the story I always told, my battery blew up in Ensenada, and I couldn't call AAA. There was no car dealer. There's no car repair places. You just got to rely on the kindness of strangers to find a brother and a cousin who thinks he has a battery that might fit for this, and it takes hours and hours to do this. You suddenly realize you're not in America anymore, and the things you take for granted, you can't take for granted anymore. So you've decided to go into, today we're going to talk about this journey into the Spanish-speaking world outside of the United States. And really more than that, I thought of it as just kind of leaving the land of English and into a world where people speak Spanish and where the governments don't always function as clearly and as well. The rules aren't as defined as they are here. The safety net isn't as large and instantly available as we assume it always is. There's always somebody that can come and help you, a cop to protect you, AAA to come change your tire, all that kind of stuff we just take for granted. But what you pointed out to me is there's a deeper historical context to this journey that you've been on, this initial part of the journey. Talk about this, from Tulum to Tikal. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we started in the Yucatan Peninsula specifically because we were fascinated by the Mayan civilization. And so we started in Tulum, and there's beautiful ruins right on the cliffs. And it was the main seaport for the Mayans during the classical period. And the Mayans, which we call them Mayans because that's what the Spanish named them, but it's really a series of tribes that extend from southern Mexico all the way down through Honduras and El Salvador. And we know them as mysterious because there's this 300-year gap where they evacuated all of their cities, and we don't know why. And so and then we know that they were advanced. They had astrologically accurate calendars. They did advanced mathematics, but they didn't have the wheel. They didn't have metals, right? It was a very interesting place in the world that we wanted to explore. So we started in Tulum, and we got to explore ruins, snorkel. We swam with sea turtles. The Akumal Bay has this beautiful kind of bay of seagrass where the turtles just come in every morning to graze at the bottoms of the lagoon. And so Cora and I got to go out and swim with sea turtles. And then there was another lagoon, which was the mangroves, because the mangroves are saltwater tolerant trees. And
right at the border between the land and the salt ocean are these trees with giant roots that somehow form these ecosystems between the two.
Yeah, really elaborate ecosystems. Like from Florida all the way south, they are the ecosystem along the coastline where small fish and animals and crocodiles and everything hides and lives and eats and works within these mangrove roots. And they're huge. They're not tall trees, but the root system goes down into the water, and evidently they pull the salt out. And what we heard, I haven't looked it up on Wikipedia yet, but that they put the salt into a yellow leaf, and it's a sacrificial leaf they put all the salt into it and then it falls off. So that's how they clean out the salt water.
Wow.
But yes, we got to swim around the mangrove lagoons, this brackish water where there were some freshwater fish and some saltwater fish, and really enjoyed that experience.
It was fun because it was our kids' first experience with real snorkeling, like out in the wild too. So not in a pool, exactly, not in a controlled environment or a pool or anything like that. So there was there was this moment when we were first starting. There was there's real big fish in here.
Mhm.
Some of them are as big as Bradley is, and he's just snorkeling along like obliviously. But
Yeah,
it
when
was fun.
one of our tour guides pointed out a barracuda, there's like in the back of my mind, I'm like, they're safe, right?
Barracuda's 3.5 feet long and just as long as Bradley is tall, but
Giant
I'm
teeth.
sure he won't attack.
Exactly. Giant teeth and everything here, but they're safe, aren't they?
They're
So,
a little intimidating. Yeah.
so you really have, let's talk about that, because that's a great imagery. You really are at this edge of our world where the fresh water meets the salt water, where America meets the Mayan world, where we go from a predominantly English-speaking country to a predominantly Spanish-speaking world. It's that barrier that most of us never cross. If we do, we cross it in the touristy way. We stay in a hotel in Cancun and go out and look. It's like going to Hawaii and watching them do the fire dances at the lobby of the hotel. We don't really go out and experience it. But you guys started in Cancun and then went. That was kind of the jumping off point to get into this world. What was it like leaving that touristy environment and into the real deal?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces was our goal with our travels was to kind of try to get away from that like hygienic, like cleansed 5-star resort kind of a feel that a lot of people experience when they travel, and really get into like the community and feel the culture. And one of the ways that we've decided to do that is we use Airbnb primarily for renting houses. So Airbnb, VRBO, that kind of a thing, where we're actually renting a home in the community. So one, it gets us kind of out of the tourist zone, right? So we get to stay where real Mexicans are real
Guatemalans or Belizeans or whatever.
So we have neighbors, we have people living above us or below us, maybe. Like it's just I feel like we get a good, or at least a better feel for kind of the area that we're in. And I think when we arrived in Mexico, we stayed in Akumal, which is a small bay about halfway between Cancun and Tulum. And it was the realization that that we do have neighbors and that people are there. And what was it? It was the third day I think that we were in Akumal Bay. Hurricane Grace came by and literally made landfall about 10 miles south of where we were staying. And it was a category 1. So it was like 95-mile-an-hour winds, which we're from the high desert in California. So we get winds, like 30, 40-mile-an-hour winds. But I'll tell you, hurricanes are no joke. They're like 95-mile-an-hour winds sustained is just on a different level than anything we had seen before.
Yeah, it woke us and all the kids up at like 2:30 in the morning, just howling winds. And it felt like somebody was throwing buckets of water at the windows constantly. And yeah, we didn't get much sleep that night. We just kind of all cuddled in the bed and talked about how exciting it was to be in a hurricane. And then the next morning, as it started to die down, so we had no electricity, no Wi-Fi, which really made running our business and doing schoolwork difficult. But we had told everybody, hey, we don't know how long this is going to last. Give us some grace as we figure things out. But once it died down, Michael went out and was just wandering the neighborhood, helping the neighbors pick up tree branches.
When I first went out, the roads were literally like trees were blocking the road. So there was nothing, no cars could get through or anything. So I was just kind of helping as I could, drag stuff out of the road and that kind of thing. But seeing the community really came together. Like it was really great. So watching, everybody coming out of their homes, they're all helping clean up the community. And, even though they had been in a rough 24-hour period, right? I mean, a lot of them are living in. They weren't as lucky as we were to be in a big concrete house with, secure and not blowing away. A lot of them have the traditional smaller huts where maybe they were like out in the, they have their entire roof was blown off during this because it's made out of palm fronds, like just craziness. But they're all helping each other and laughing and smiling and just kind of doing their best to get back to life as usual.
One of the things that struck me, the little bit I've ventured across that border, is how different the world is 20 minutes south of the border. 2 hours south of the border, 2 days south of the border. The one time I went to Belize, the farthest I've ever gone, the place you're going to talk about today here a little bit. One of the things that struck me is how accepting the world is. Not everything's going to run on schedule. Not everything's going to work perfect. It's more than sort of a mañana, we'll worry about it tomorrow attitude. It's an acceptance that not everything works well all the time, and you have to constantly adapt. The internet goes down, the electricity fails, the government may or may not be there for you. The police may or may not really be there to protect you. They may be there to rob you or bribe you or something, or get a bribe. It's a different sensibility that I found very unnerving because I'm used to order. I'm used to structure. I'm used to understanding that, well, this can't be. And I found myself saying, well, how can this be? I want to get outraged. What do you mean the internet's out? What do you mean the electricity's out? When's it going to come back up? What do you mean the water isn't safe to drink? Et cetera, et cetera. Talk about that, because there is a different attitude in these places, I guess, because they have to adapt differently than we do.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't have the same structure and stability that we have come to expect and rely on in the United States. And one of the things I had a conversation yesterday, or day before yesterday, with a friend of ours that we were staying with, or kind of was showing us through the city. And I said that one of the things that I appreciate the most about what I've seen in Guatemala is there's this kind of an overarching attitude of like, we can find a way to make this happen.
Yeah,
like
right.
If I want something to happen, like there is a way to make it happen. And, whether it's thinking outside the box or working, doing things as Americans that we wouldn't even consider. The Mayans built their pyramids by carrying them up one rock at a time. We think like, oh, well, how could they possibly do that? It's just determination and lots of time.
Through a jungle. Right. It's not in a blank plain. Well, I always tell I'll tell at least one of the stories here today, maybe both of them real quickly, because I know it's your story, not my story, but just to relate and my experience of that same thing, that resilience, that we'll find a way to get it done. The one and only time I got in trouble down in Mexico, I'm in Ensenada and my battery blows up, as crazy as that sounds. And I'm literally, several hours south of the border in Ensenada, south of the California border where I live here in California. And I suddenly realized how helpless I was. There was no AAA to come replace the battery. There was no car dealer to have it towed into and have it fixed. There was no even auto parts chain that I could find where I could just take a taxi and go over and get one and put it in myself. So what did I do? I sat there and stared at it like a little kid and cried. And then people came by, total strangers, and all offered to help. And one after another, they said, oh, I think I know somebody. He might have a battery. I'll call my cousin. He might have somebody. It's this kind of ad hoc network that takes over. And hours went by, and somebody showed up with a battery and put it in.
It's like a miracle.
Like a miracle. I mean, they really did carry through. Imagine if you're on the side of the road and we all had, here in California, we all had to pull over and say, can I help you? Let me go see if I can find a tire for you. Let me go see if I can find a battery. And then we start calling people, or we forget about it and we get busy and there they are stuck on the side. It's this attitude that people come together and figure it out on the fly. I wasn't ready for that at all.
Yeah, and I think in America we've come to a large extent expect that security or that security blanket to support us. So the police are going to come help. AAA is going to come help. We have this somebody's going to come and save us.
Car dealer, somebody. There's a million people. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Down here, they know that there isn't a government that's going to come save them. They don't count on it. They know there isn't if the police come, it's may or may not be to help, right?
Yeah, right.
So they have that. It is just that really sense of I've got to handle this and I need to figure it out. So yeah.
And a communal sense, which I don't. Yeah. We're so isolated and alone. I come into my house, I pull the garage down behind me, and I'm in my own little castle, my own little world here in Southern California. I may not
Right.
even
And I
know my
realize
neighbor's name.
it's the dependency on professionals. So we
Yes.
have a professional police force. We have a professional auto support thing. We have a professional delivery
Yes.
system. We have people whose entire job is just to serve us.
Yes.
And here in these communities, to your point, it's who you know. It's a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. And you have to, that network is one of the things that keeps them together, because you have to give into the community, because you know that at any given moment, you're going to have to receive back from that same community.
Exactly.
That there's this constant giving and receiving that goes on, that, in the United States, you don't have to be nice to your neighbors because you don't need them.
Yes,
right? They won't be the ones who come and rescue you when your house burns down. You have professionals who are going to rescue you when your house burns down.
I got an insurance carrier, and he's going to bring out a professional to fix the water damage, to restore the roof. I'm not going to have my neighbors all to come together like in the Wild West days and raise a barn together.
Yep, exactly. And so I feel like there are serious advantages to having professionals who, this is what they do, right? To your point, barn raising really depends on if you have enough motivated people to do that. One of the things we've noticed is that most of the Spanish-speaking world is in a constant state of disrepair or construction. Most of the buildings are halfway done. And we asked our friend, is it a lack of labor? Is it a lack of construction materials? Why don't you finish these things? And he's like, well, they come, they work as long as they want to, and then they go home, right? It's just, you can't even imagine that. If a construction company was like, well, it may take 3 months, it might take 6 months, depending on whether or not Bob wants to work.
Depending on how long we can get the guys to work on a daily basis.
And we might run out of money along the way, and somebody else might come in and suddenly want a bribe, so we got to stop, and we got to get in a political fight and whatever else, and it just comes
and you
goes.
may simply not be able to get any materials for a period of time.
The boat with the blocks on it didn't make it in this week, so we got to wait another however long it is.
So next year. At least in my second story of that infamous trip for me in Ensenada, prior to my battery blowing up, I'm trying to find the restaurant in the dark where a hotel said, go try this restaurant here. And so we're driving around my little car here, and my wife says, stop. I said, what? I slammed the brakes. I said, I'm not getting mad. What do you make this? She said, there's a hole in the road. I said, there's no hole in the road. This is the main road through town. If it's a little pothole. She said, no, there's a giant hole up there. I said, you got to be kidding me. And we creep up in the dark, and sure enough, there's like a 10-foot deep, 10-foot wide hole where they were repairing something like a water pipe. They didn't put up barricades. They didn't put up warning lights. They just left. Everybody knows they're out there working on that hole. Only the crazy Americans don't know that there's a hole in the middle of the road. That attitude, again, of it is just that unexpected. You expect the unexpected. It doesn't work the way you expect it to work. It may not work at all very well, but somehow it goes on and it moves and it gets stuff done. You just got to be prepared. Talk about you were on some road traveling. I don't know if it was Mexico or Belize or Guatemala, and suddenly somebody just put up a rope across the road and wanted money.
So we were on one of the craziest roads that I've ever driven on. I've gone off-roading in the Mojave Desert where we live. I've done a lot of stuff like that, but we were literally going from, Flores, Guatemala to Simoke-Champey, both of which are relatively large tourist spots. So you would expect the road between to be decent.
As an American, you would expect the road
you would
to
expect
be.
It. Yeah. But I learned an important lesson that day is don't trust Google Maps. Always ask a local what road you should take. And so we were going up and down this crazy road, and at the beginning of the road and then at the other end of the road, once you've gone through, 30 miles of our 60 kilometers, as they say down here, of just crazy up and down and side to side road. Somebody was out there working, so they have this kind of shovel and a little hoe that they're out there on the road with. And, this guy's probably been standing there all day next to this cable, so he's not actually doing any work because he's got a shovel and a hoe right there in this one little spot. But as we pull up, he's like, oh, obviously, he's working with the hoe on the road, making the road passable, of course, is what he does. And he's got a cable strewn across the road. And he says, "Oh no, I'm working on the road, and to pass, you have to pay me 200 quetzales." And I'm just like, as an American, I'm sitting there like,
no, I
"This
don't.
is the craziest thing I've ever." Right? I'm like, "This is the craziest thing ever." And I look at him like, really, like 200 quetzales, and he's just like stone faced, yeah, nods his head, 200 quetzales. I was like, okay. I like look behind us, look for like options of going around. Absolutely nothing. There's one road. The rest of it's jungle. And sure enough, I pay him the 200 quetzals because I don't have another option. He lowers the little rope and lets us go by. But
well, it wasn't a little rope. It was like a half-inch steel cable that cemented into both sides of the thing. Like, we're not driving through this. Michael had his machete with him, but I didn't think we were willing to get into a battle on the highway. So at first we're like, oh my gosh, that was literally highway robbery. Like that. I mean, we weren't held up at gunpoint, but we weren't going the way we needed to go unless we
paid this guy 200 quetzals.
And if you gave him any trouble, it would be 400 quetzales or 600 quetzales.
Yeah.
And so I realized, like, okay, we just need to reframe that. This is just a non-government sanctioned toll road. That's all.
Right. And it was really funny because once we got further down the road into where we met up with some friends that were showing us around town, I told them this story. I was like expecting him to be like, appalled, and he was like, "Oh no, that's pretty common here in Guatemala." He's like,
"Oh yeah, that happens all the time."
The local community is expected to keep up the road, but in return, like they're allowed to, the police don't stop them from putting up little toll booths like that. And I was like, this road was not maintained; it was a riverbed.
Yeah, right.
Either way, it's just that's just how things are done down here.
On a serious note, I read all the time that in the smaller villages of Mexico, particularly because there's such lawlessness outside of the big cities, the drug cartels seem to run a lot of these areas, the drug crime syndicates and whatnot, that many of these small towns have taken matters into their own hands, and they literally post armed sentries on the town limit, and they won't let people come in. So if you just show up, they may not let you even arrive because they don't know who you are or what you're doing.
Well, we didn't experience that in Mexico or Belize, but our friend here in Guatemala was telling us that they so much cannot trust the police to do the police's job that they have taken matters into their own hands, and they will hunt criminals down and lynch them. If they if they feel like you have broken the laws of the community is going to take this into their own hands and deal with it.
And literally, he had an instance about 5 years ago where they had captured the police had captured the son of a drug lord for doing something. It was a very serious crime, and the police ended up letting him go because the drug lord paid him off, basically.
No. The drug lord brought an army and surrounded the police station and said, "We'll burn you to the ground.
Even worse,
if you don't release my son." Right. So it's a complete, like, when you realize that the police is undermanned, and like, even if they wanted to do the right thing, they simply don't have the firepower to fight back against an army. Like, it's insanity. It is the Wild West in a lot of respects.
It feels like the Wild West. It feels like all the images we grew up with, lawless towns where, Clint Eastwood rides in, the man with no name, and he takes over. Yeah. He's the law for the day here. And right or wrong, it's his way or no way. There's a lot of that in as you venture. So as we wrap up this episode of leaving the country and having to adapt to a world that doesn't look like Kansas anymore and doesn't work the way we're used to weighing it work. How have you adapted to that? Is it just simply, oh, well, that's the way it is? Is there American outrage? I'm an American. This can't be like this. They can't do this to me. Or is it something else? How are you adapting to this world? And much less the fact that different cultures and different attitudes and different structures, they speak a different language too. All of this. See if you can summarize that in a takeaway here as we come to the end.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll let Caitlin finish. But I think one of the things that's really struck me is how versatile and how quickly we adapt to just the new normal, right? Mm-hmm. Watching our kids do this journey has been just incredible as a parent, and then also trying to look at it from a bigger perspective, and realizing that this journey, this traveling that we're doing, is just their their new normal, even though we've only been doing it for not even 2 months yet. I don't think it's just become like, like, oh, what's our new house? Where are we headed next? Right. Bradley never knows if we're going to come back to a house or go to the next house. He's always like, well, we didn't pack all of our stuff before we left. Every time we get into the car, we're like, don't worry, we're coming back to this home again or tonight or tomorrow or whatever we're coming back. Right. But so just watching them and seeing, and it goes the other way too. We've visited, I think, 10 like humongous, just magnificent Mayan ruins,
including Chichen Itza.
I mean, just magnificent, incredible feats that the Mayans created these things. Over 1,000, in some cases 1,500, 2,000 years ago. And the biggest takeaway from Cora is by the time we visited our last one in Tikal, she was like, not another Mayan ruin.
They all look the same.
I'm totally a history nut, so I'm just eating it up and like, this is incredible, such a great experience. And then that's her takeaway, is just, oh my gosh, they all look the same. All it means is that we have to walk through the jungle for 2 hours each time,
climb up this pyramid. Yeah, exactly.
That Tikal was just glorious, and they built these temples like 200 feet tall. Like, these are not small things. No. And we had to sell Bradley on the idea of going up to the top of one, because that's where Star Wars was filmed. Like, that's what we had to pull out to get him excited.
That was the enticement.
Yeah, right.
Well, Caitlin, you're our resident philosopher here. You always seem to come up with some philosophical take on this whole world. I know this was a rapid run through the world of the Mayan world, from Tulum to Tikal, this Mundo Mayan, or however you say it in Espanol here, the Mayan world. It was that. It's for you, it was an adventure. It was historical. It had a deeper meaning than the kids probably picked up on here. But on a practical level, it's your first step out of the world, across the border, into what will be the rest of the world, this journey that only gets more different, more exotic, and more different from where you came.
Yeah, I loved your metaphor of moving from the freshwater into the saltwater. And I think this has been a transitionary period, and you have to learn how to adapt. We've been in the safety of our freshwater river in the United States, swimming around, doing life as we know life. And now we're swimming out into the open ocean. And we're going to have to learn how to adapt. So, for example, alligators are all freshwater, but crocodiles can swim in the saltwater. And they adapted by creating there's a gland in the saltwater crocodile that takes in the salt and excretes it and gets rid of it, similar to the way the mangrove gets rid of the salt. And there's just a lot of shedding of our expectations of what life should be like, that I think is how we're doing this transitionary period and learning how to adapt to these new conditions, where obviously life thrives down here, right? It's like going into the coral reef and realizing the fish can swim in the salt water, right? And this is their normal. And so how quickly can we learn to adapt to our new conditions? And in my experience, really the fastest way to adapt is just to release expectations of what life should look like, and simply accept and appreciate life as it is, and find things to appreciate, and find the silver lining, right? So they might go slow, but it gets done, right?
Yeah, right.
And so just to understand that this is how life is done here, and you need to work in these conditions now.
So maybe the takeaway is let go. Let go of the safety net. Let go of your fears. Let go of your fierce independence and unwillingness to reach out and have others lend a hand here, and to go into the unknown, and to test yourself and to see, can we adapt?
And I think too, especially for Americans, it's important to get rid of that should be, right? So trying to shed that and get rid of, this is how life should be, or this is how it should be because this is how I expect it. It is how it is, and whether us being able to get rid of that expectation that life should be within this box or how it is really what's going to allow us to experience the cultures and the rest of the world without it being misery, or without it being something that upsets us and we get frustrated with. So I think getting rid of that, this is how it should be mentality.
Shed the shoulds.
Shed the shoulds. All right, we're going to shed the shoulds at the end of this show, and we're going to show you how they got to where they are next as we continue the journey with the All Over the Map family as they shed their life in search of a new one. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio.net.